All right. Welcome to this session on building trustworthy AI, a data-centric compliance framework, exploring how organizations ensure safety, reliability, and transparency in AI systems through robust data governance. This session covers key AI risks and outlines a structured framework with essential controls, such as data loss prevention, logging for safety, testing for reliability, and metadata management for explainability. You will learn how NIST-aligned logs and AI-assisted testing strengthens security, forming a comprehensive data-centric approach to AI compliance and trust. Leading this discussion is Thadi Murali, an operational AI, data, and technology risk executive with over 2 decades of experience across leading financial institutions and consultancies. He combines deep expertise in operational risk, AI and data governance technology, and cyber risk and emerging digital asset risks. Thadi has proven track record shaping enterprise-wide risk frameworks aligning with NIST AI RMF and Basel guidelines, and is recognized for building high-performing teams and driving responsible AI adoption. With this, please welcome Thadi Murali. Murli, it's a pleasure having you on stage. It's over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a very generous introduction. Um, I'm really excited to be talking about this topic. It's something that I'm very passionate about. It's dear and near to me. But I am also it's a vast topic, and I wanted to uh, make it relevant to the audience here by making it more technology centric and data specific. Uh, so I hopefully, uh, you know, when I go over all of this, those things that I will be talking about from a data centric perspective will resonate with things you are doing in data right now. All right. So a few things. Uh, I don't know if you can see my face or just the presentation, but I'll just uh, kick it off here. Let me know if you can't see this properly or it's not very clear. And also, I have a few survey questions that I put in at various points. I'll ask the team here to show them. For example, I did want to get an idea of the audience's expertise or experience in data governance. I know a lot of them are in ETL and BI, but I just wanted to get a flavor. So let's have that survey. All right, great. While you're answering that, so let me explain how I try to structure this presentation. So first thing we will go over is we're talking about AI. It's a very relevant topic. So we'll talk about what is the AI solution technology stack at a high level. Then we will get into compliance and risk. Compliance is a vast subject, but we will focus on those that are universally accepted. For example, if you go to a specific industry, they have their own compliance. But I don't want to get into those kind of specifics, but talk about what are universally accepted risks that one has to comply and mitigate. So that's what we'll talk about. And then try to bring in the data angle. So we will first talk about the AI solution technology stack, then the AI risks, bring the data connection, and then get into specifics of how to mitigate these risks using data controls. And then at the end, we will sum up with what we call an AI data-centric compliance framework. All right. Again, AI solution technology stack when you talk about AI solutions, I wanted to give a holistic view of AI solutions. So on one angle, we have the infrastructure on which AI solutions are based. Because AI does take up a lot of computing power. Most organizations use cloud infrastructures. I mean, it is not really, it's pretty cost prohibitive to use your own infrastructure. So that's the typical thing. So the cloud infrastructures, the popular ones are obviously AWS, Azure, Google. So that's one. Then you have the platforms. So platforms are those that one uses to build AI applications. And there's many tools. I just listed a few. This is by no means exhaustive. For front end, you normally use something like Figma, Canva, or you might develop your own front end using HTML, JavaScript, CSS, React, and so on. Or you might use integrated IDEs like Cursor, Replit, V0, or any IDE that you're familiar with. But these are platforms that help you build AI applications. So that is the next set. And then we come to AI applications. And AI applications, I think it's good to break it up into LLM-based applications, LLM with RAG, and then AI applications which have workflow like agentic. So again, I put some vendors out there, again, but it's no means exhaustive. But the key takeaway here is look at the technology stack from an application perspective, a platform perspective, an infrastructure perspective. Look at it holistically. And also when you look at an application, try to understand whether it's purely LLM-based or LLM with RAG or LLM with agentic, because all these things, the kind of risks you're having with this AI solution. So that is the genesis of why you have to look at it holistically. All right. And I think I had a couple of questions here, another survey questions, just to see your exposure to any of these things. So please answer that. And then let's go to the next one. When we talk about AI risks, when we talk about what are the risks of AI, it is a very vast topic in the sense that every risk that you know right now when you build an application is heightened. That means the same risks are there, but in the AI world, they're heightened. Like, for example, if you were previously getting phishing attacks, now with AI, the phishing attacks get more sophisticated. The phishing emails before used to see mistakes in the language or something. You don't see that anymore. You see more volumes because the threat agent is also using AI. So your defense is now reduced. The barriers are reduced. So everything is heightened. So that's why if you go to NIST, they have around 12 risks. If you go to OWASP, which is another agency, they have a list: prompt injection, they'll get more technical, prompt poisoning. So there's all kinds of risks. And if you, depending on the industry, you'll see other risks. But how do you, but what we have tried here is to give a general framework on how to look at risks. So I would put it broadly under 5 categories. One is reliability, and this is useful all the time when you're trying to figure out what AI risks to have. This framework will really help. Reliability, these are the principles from NIST, so this is still used across. Reliability means is the solution you're building, is the application you're building, is it reliable? Is it accurate? Is the output accurate? So under this, you'll have risks like hallucination, biases, all those things. You can add up all kinds of things. But if the output is not good, the solution is not good. So that is the first test. Then you don't even have to do the other checks. You just have to say it's not reliable. I don't care about other things. I'm not going to use it. So first thing is reliability. Second thing in today's world is security. Security there's all kinds of security, but I would say information security is key. There are other there's other risks that NIST notes down, but I don't want to go into that because they're not usually applicable for organizations. So when we talk about security, we're talking about mostly information security. Then NIST actually distinguishes. NIST, by the way, is the standards used everywhere. The other popular one is OSI, so I'm just picking up from them. Other risks is safety and privacy. So safety and privacy, security is more about attacks from outside. Safety and privacy is more about unauthorized data loss prevention. So it's mostly about privacy, intellectual property. If your application is related to social media, then abusive or violent content or hateful content, all that come into the picture. And then remember, we are dealing with AI. So the LLMs or the models that you're using are not, they're mostly black box. You don't know what's happening there. So there is the risk of transparency and explainability. For example, if you're using an LLM for decision making and someone asks, how do you come up with that? You can't just say, oh, the LLM did it. You have to explain it. So there is various risks around that. And though the black box will still remain, the focus will now be on the data. So what they couldn't explain before by the logic, now they're trying to explain with the data. So you have to have integrity around the data. You must have clear transparency on the technology stacks, on the vendor stacks, all those things. So that's where transparency and explainability come. And then finally, the risk of relating to accountability. This is where you need some kind of who's owning this application, who's accountable for this, who's owning this solution. It should be clear. We can never go and say, oh, I don't know what happened. It's AI's fault, LLM's fault. We can't say that. Someone has to be accountable for this. So these are the 5 broad categories. And we will look at how to use data to mitigate the risks around these 5 categories. Yeah? All right. So first thing we'll talk about is reliability. Reliability is to make sure the data you're getting, the outputs you're getting from the LLM are reliable. There's no hallucinations issues, there's no biases. That's what you want. How do you use data to protect this? And by the way, data is not the only control, but we are talking, since it's a data-centric, since it's a data-related conference, we're talking from a data control perspective. That doesn't mean you still need human in the loop and other controls, but we will focus on data. So the way you do this is testing. You have to test. And when I say test, I mean not the traditional test of functional testing, but I mean testing through making sure you have a complete prompt library for accuracy, a prompt library for bias, like questions like, hey, is, men smarter than women? And it should be, their answer should be like, no, I refuse to answer, something like that. It shouldn't be giving an answer. So that's how you test it. So you have a list of those kind of questions. If it's an underwriting question, Do we give it to this person based on his age, his or her age? Age-based biases, gender-based biases. Um, uh, you can come up with all kinds of biases. Accuracy would be who's the latest president in the country. I mean, that's a simple one, but you could talk about, hey, what is the latest HR policy, and it should give you the correct policies, things like that. You can test. You should have a list of those libraries based on the domain, and you should have expected answers. So you should now check using the libraries and the expected answers. So you should test the expected answers with the actual LLM output and compare. And by the way, the questions I mentioned were not great, but you have various agencies, like various organizations like Scale.io, which will give you a complete set of libraries. You can take them from there, and we do that all the time, and keep and build your own database of these things, and then run these periodically. Actually, it says here continuous testing, but that I wrote more for effect. But you have to test it regularly. The reason you have to test it regularly is because the LLMs keep changing, the inputs keep changing, and you can't just test it in the beginning and leave it. So this has to be done regularly. But once you do that, you will start getting scores. You'll say, oh, this is 80% reliable or 95% reliable, because 90% of the time it got the right answers, 10% it didn't get. And then you take it to the user and say, hey, it is 90% reliable. Is this okay for what your purpose is? And the guy says, no, this is a very decision around underwriting, or it's a human life medical situation, so we need 100% reliability or 99% reliability. Then in which case that doesn't pass. Or someone says, no, it's just about summarizing some meeting notes. I don't need that kind of reliability. Then it's fine. That's how you decide. So this is where you use data to build your libraries and your expected answer databases. So we move on to the next one. This is security. How do you use data for security in the AI world? Everything you're doing on security right now with data, the logs, the firewalls, the authentication checks, all those still hold. That we're not touching, but we're talking about new risks because of AI. But how do you get to know them? How do you get to know these new risks? And the way you have to do that is you have to build an intelligence-driven security, meaning you have to scan globally for losses or events that have happened because of AI. And how do you get to know that? Loss databases are available. NIST, for example, keeps a vulnerability database, a national vulnerability database. You get that all over. Sometimes many of these are free, but sometimes you might have to pay. Like, for example, IBM keeps a global database, which you have to pay a lot. But depending on our organization, once you pull those vulnerabilities, those incidents from those databases, and see if it applies to you, and that's how you can create those risk scenarios, and that'll inform the controls you need. So that's how you need to build, and this is something that's also being built using external loss databases, external vulnerability databases, external threat databases, and informing the organization on what to do. Remember, I mean, a big thing like CrowdStrike or the incident where the CEO, there was a fake, those kind of things are are what you hear in the news. But those are the big events. But there's a lot of other things that are happening all over which you don't hear. So you have to go to these lost databases to understand the other AI incidents that are happening. So that's why it's so important to keep oneself informed, keep the organization informed. Yeah. So this is the other thing we can use for data from a security perspective. Then data controls for safety and privacy. Now, a lot of organizations are already doing this, so this is not really that uncommon. The other one, the loss thing, I mean, the loss databases, I'm seeing few organizations using it, not everyone. And the testing is catching on, but a lot of the AI applications are still in ideation and pilot mode, so they're not using it as rigorously. But this one is actually being used by almost every organization that I know. I work, and anyone who's getting into AI, they're just making sure they are logging all this. So this is quite common, but I'll still go over it. The prompts, that is, whatever prompts one is putting to the LLM. And when I say prompt, it doesn't always have to be through a chatbot. It can also be through a system prompting, meaning there's an application, an agent, which is prompting the LLM. But all that has to be logged. And there is a control right there, a DLP control, a privacy control, which checks. And if there's anything that is put there which doesn't follow, which is showing some kind of privacy data leakage, it immediately stops it. So it's a preventative control right there. So at the prompt level, then the logs are monitored. I mean, logs, everything is noted into the logs. Not only the prompts, even the outputs. So even though the question may be it might be pretty harmless, AI might give you some data which would be privacy related. For example, you're asking a question and it says, "Oh, I know you're a so-and-so man with so-and-so issues." So and it might have figured that out through just statistics, but that's not allowed. So there might be some health HIPAA regulation that it might have violated. So you have to check both the input and the output, and then you must have analytics run on that to test that. So those are the detective controls. So I think the important thing here is you must prevent data leaks at the prompt level and also at the output level, and you must use like a multi-layered control approach. That means preventative controls, detective controls, input controls, output controls, all of this. And all these are data related. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, these are very, very data-centric applications. You have to create rich databases, and then you have to run analytics on them to check. Yeah. So those are for safety and privacy. And then I'll move to transparency and explainability. On this one, I want to say that the heading is very exciting. I like that. Even if the LLM is a black box, the data it uses should not be. Right? So one has to make sure one truly, truly understands the data that the LLM uses. So when I say the data, obviously every LLM is trained on some kind of data which we don't have access to, but I'm talking about the data that we use in RAG applications. That means the corporate applications. The data the corporate data that you're feeding to the LLM to make it usable for the organization. That data has to be completely transparent, completely accurate, completely clear. And when I say, how do you make it completely accurate, completely clear? Well, the trick is metadata. You have to have lineage information, attributes information, relationships information, for both structured and unstructured data, and that audit trail is what's that metadata is going to give you the kind of clarity that you need when you're trying to understand the data. For example, if AI says so and so customer is high risk based on your metadata and the relationship, it gives you a clear answer. And then you know, oh, I get it. Because you have not only given a rich metadata for it to make deductions, but so it becomes very clear. So that relationships, where the data is coming from, so that you have accuracy, all that uh, is this is all that enriches and gives clarity to the data and the explainability. Yeah. So this is, I think, just taking off. I am actually noticing a lot of, not lots, but some users using graph databases and some other kinds of databases to build this metadata. I mean, they have existing metadata like Colibra and so on, but they're trying to integrate that more cohesively with the regular data. And I think it is still not perfect, but we are seeing a lot of experimentation in the space. But this will catch on, and I think this is a great area one can get into as you link controls for transparency and explainability. I think we have covered a lot of ground, and I have gone through it somewhat fast because I just had a short time and there was a lot of good concepts here. But I think I'll pause here a little bit because I have another input. And that'll make us come to the end of the framework. So again, let's go over the big things. I went only over the reliability, the security, the safety, and transparency. Accountability is not very data-centric. That has to be, you must have some kind of human in the loop to make it accountable. Obviously, you must maintain a registry of who is responsible and all that accountable, but that's not much of a data thing. But for reliability, security, safety, and transparency, we have talked about data controls. I'll just sum it up. Reliability, continuous testing of input, from a bias perspective, from a hallucination perspective, create prompt libraries, create outputs, which you think are the correct outputs, compare them regularly. That gives you a score for reliability. Security, make sure you move towards an intelligence-driven security. Some organizations are already doing it. They're looking at what's happening in these lost databases, like the NIST vulnerability database, and trying to use that to inform their controls. Safety and privacy, this is almost every organization that is in AI is using it. They have prompt logs, output logs, DLP, all inbuilt into the solution. Transparency and explainability, this is an area which is still growing, but we have to build metadata into the RAG and a cohesive integration of both. And that is how data can help in addressing these risks. I think at this point we come to the end of this presentation, and I will take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Thadi. Thank you for this wonderful, wonderful session. And it was great, listening to you talking about the AI-centric, data-centric compliance framework. And right now we have some of the questions from our attendees. So I'm bringing them on stage one by one, and if you could answer them, that would be absolutely fantastic. Okay. So the first question from one of our participants is, how do you prioritize which AI risks to control first when the resources are limited?
Excellent question. So I think remember, all these risks that we talked about are generic risks, but which risks to prioritize depend completely on the application. So what I would do is we use a framework where we put applications in two categories. One is efficiency or improvement, workload reduction kind of application. Another is more a decision-making application. So for example, something like using Copilot to create summarization of notes. That's an efficiency thing. But using an AI application to make a decision on underwriting, who should get the loan, that's a decision kind of based application. So the point I'm trying to make is, if it is an efficiency application, if it's an efficiency, then we probably don't care much about transparency and explainability. So that is low. Maybe we don't care much about reliability too, or we care, but it's not. Then what becomes most important is security, safety, and privacy, right? But if it's a decision-making application, then reliability, bigger focus on that. Even transparency, for example, if you have got to explain to regulators, or you could be sued and someone needs to explain how the decision came about, then you need transparency and explainability. That becomes very high. So I think it's all based on the use case, and we might even say certain applications are so there's so many legal issues, so we don't even use AI for that. So you might even come up with that decision, because why even take that risk, right? You completely avoid it. But that will inform you. So it has to be risk-based. It has to be solution-based. So you have to say which risks apply for that solution, and then make a decision on priority. Yep.
Thank you, Thadi, for that. Okay, the next question is, what should logging capture for AI that's different from a traditional app logging?
So that was on here. So see, in traditional logging, right? Just remember that when you have a traditional application, you have a screen. And some kind of input screen. And you're actually, whatever you put on that input screen is actually controlled. It'll just say, enter your name, enter the so-and-so information. It's controlled. There's a question, there's a field which checks, so the input is controlled. But in prompts, nothing is controlled. You can write anything. Yes, usually you will write what is relevant to you, whatever you want to find out, but you could key in anything, really. You could say, I'm this, I'm that. You could give any context. You could give history. You could, and then ask the question. You could put anything. So the point is, you have to capture the entire prompt. You can't just say, I'll capture this and that. You have to capture everything in the prompt. Then you have to look for certain key things that you're searching for. You have to, if you're looking for privacy, that's a big thing nowadays. But you should also look for intellectual property. Is there anything there that is intellectual to your organization that people are putting in? So you just check that. Especially if it's not relevant to that application. So then you must also look at the output. So I think from a traditional logging perspective, you would capture the the input data, which is related to the questions, and you would check, you would do various validation checks, or you would check various things which are related to that that particular input field. But here you have to check, it's more free-form text. It is just free-flowing text, so you must use, you must capture everything, and the checks are more broader, especially from a safety and privacy, just making sure nothing is privacy data or intellectual property data, or even things like the content is not hateful or is creating abusive, the things like that. Sentiment analysis.
Thanks, Thadi. This is like my favorite question. How should organization test for bias in AI outputs? Test for bias in AI outputs.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How should organizations test for bias in AI outputs?
Test for bias, yeah. Test for bias. So here, it is very specific to that application, right? I mean, if that solution, you don't care much about biases there, then you don't have to bother testing. So, someone asked, what is the priority? So it's not like every time you have to test for this just because it's an AI application. But if that application output has, there could be something in that output that could be a result of a bias. For example, underwriting. When you're giving loans, you just have to make sure there are no biases. Or HR, you're selecting candidates. You got to make sure there's no, if you're using AI to, shortlist candidates and all, you got to make sure there's no biases. So what are the, let's take the HR because everyone understands that. What are the biases you could have? You could have an age bias. You could have a gender bias. You could have, I'm not listing all the biases, but you could have these kinds of biases. So you have to create a prompt library. You have to situation, and you're saying, would you take a guy versus a girl, man versus a woman? Would you take an older person versus a younger person? Race, right? Race is another thing. You give a situation and you say, these are things. Would you take this versus that? And a proper LLM which has been tested should say no. It should not. It should either refuse to answer, or it should say it should not. It should give an answer which you should know the expected answer first of all. So you should expect certain kind of answers. So it should give those. If it's not giving those, or it's tilting towards something that you're not happy with, then you give it a low score. So that's how you check. So that's how you test. But you have to build a library specific to that particular application you're building for. And of course, all of these libraries can come from the people who are in the field, they're experts. But you can also go to, like I said, various organizations and say, can you give me the libraries for this particular field? And many times they do have it, but there's a cost associated with that. So that's how you do it. But you have to build those libraries, and you have to, and same thing with, hallucinations. Hallucinations is giving false answers. So you'd say, like, let's say your database is on HR related database, and you're saying, what is the paternity leave if someone has to go on holiday? Is expecting a child, and it should give the answer. The answer because it's there in your HR logs. But if it's not giving an answer from that, it's giving a generic answer, or you can check those things. So you can do some accuracy testing. Sometimes it makes up stuff. You can ask what happened. What was the HR policy in 1965? And that there was no HR policy in your organization at the time, but it still gives you an answer. And that's AI. Then you would just laugh about it. But for an organization, that's a no-no. There's no reason for it to give. It should have said, I don't have that information. So like that, you have to build these. Obviously, what I'm saying is not an exhaustive list of prompt libraries, but you can build that very easily with experts and other databases. Yeah, and then test it for expected answers.
Thanks, Murali. So in the interest of time, we have just one more question. How should organizations balance innovation speed with AI safety and compliance? So balancing innovation with AI safety.
Uh,
So
so I think, no, I got the question. I was trying to see how best to answer that. Innovation with AI safety. So first of all, anything you do, you have to, safety is it's not like one or the other. It's not like you'll have innovation but no safety, or such a fantastic idea that safety is not important. You cannot have that. So you have to always have safety. But how do you balance it? I mean, in fact, I would say that any application, even at the ideation stage, because if you do it too late, it's this thing, it becomes a problem. But right from the ideation stage, when you're thinking of the idea, you have to use these guardrails, these principles. Hey, does reliability apply? Does security apply? Does safety and privacy apply? Does transparency apply? In most cases, you will definitely see safety, security, all those apply. But they might say this is no privacy data involved, nothing, this, that. But it should be in the early life cycle. So I would say if a solution is going through ideation, then pilot, then or proof of concept, then pilot, then production, I would say you have to do it early, but you should also do it at every gate. Because when you did initially, we thought there was no problems. Then when we realized, when we did POC, we realized there is some danger. So again, you look at it at that level and make an analysis and say, hey, did we miss out something? Then a pilot, you're testing with a small group of people. Again, you get to know it. So every time you learn more and more about these things, and then you do production. Production too, you have to test it periodically. But I think throughout the journey, you will get to know. It's not like all the answers in the beginning and say, hey, these are the safety issues, I'm going to do it. But have it throughout the cycle, throughout the life cycle of the AI solution, and keep asking these questions, and keep learning about the application, and keep applying the controls. Yeah, that's what I would say.
yeah, thank you, Thadi. Thank you for answering all the questions, and thank you for having this wonderful session. It was lovely having you talk in today's this year's TDS as well. And I really thank all the participants as well who joined this session. So with this, we come to a close of building trustworthy AI, a data-centric framework. Please log into other sessions that are happening in parallel. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you, Thadi.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
And reach out to me if you have any questions through Datagaps. It'll be great to interact with you all. Bye.
For further questions, feel free to reach contact@datagaps.com. Request a free demo, scan the QR code below. Thank you.